In this video, I'm going to discuss designing and utilizing effective instruction in the classroom. The Texas teacher competency addressed in this video is competency number 3. The teacher understands procedures for designing effective and coherent instruction and assessment based on appropriate learning goals and objectives. In order to fully address this competency, I am going to explain the difference between learning goals and objectives and explain how to create each effectively. To finish off, I will be discussing different strategies of effective instruction. First of all, there are many different definitions of goals and objectives. A basic definition of a goal is a broad, general idea of what the teacher and others interested in education want students to learn. An objective is an observable and measurable action that the teacher wants students to accomplish during the lesson. A goal is a more generic action or an outcome which can be striven for, while an objective is a specific action. Goals may not be strictly measurable, but objectives are. Some may look at objectives as a way to obtain a desirable goal. Both goals and objectives are important for teachers to recognize and implement into the classroom. However, it is of extreme importance for the teacher to know the difference between the two. There are also many different types of goals. There are short-term goals or long-term goals. You might have yearly goals, monthly goals, weekly goals, or even daily goals. As a teacher, you might encounter goals that are set for you by your school, district, or state. You will also come up with your own goals for yourself, your classroom as a whole, and your students individually. It might be stressful attempting to set goals for an entire school year, so there are a few steps that can make goal setting a little simpler. When setting goals, you want to be SMART. SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Although goals are not as specific as objectives, you should still be specific in what you want your students to learn. Just stating, "I want my students to learn," is not enough. Goals must be measurable. This is where objectives come in. We utilize our objectives to make sure that goals are measurable. Goals also must be attainable. You should not attempt to make a goal that you know you and your students will not be able to reach. Goals should be relevant to what you are learning and studying. Finally, goals must be time-bound, meaning that you must ensure you have enough time to reach your desired goal. If you think about it, objectives and goals really go hand in hand. Objectives are the medium by which you can obtain your goals. Objectives are more specific though, because they are an attempt to determine how well your students have achieved a set goal. Objectives and goals both help teachers formulate good lesson planning skills. Objectives are more specific though in how they help teachers decide how they wish to assess students' knowledge on a subject. An example of a goal would be, "I want my students to become more interactive learners this 6 weeks." This is a goal because it is a more general idea of what the teacher wants from his or her students. Objectives that can help reach that specific goal are: students will be able to use strategies before, during, and after reading to aid in the construction and enhancement of meaning, and students will be able to identify and explain the significance of the essential literary elements of novels. For example, character, setting, conflict, plot, climax, resolution, theme, tone, and point of view. These are objectives because they are more specific than the goal and their outcomes are measurable. When making goals, it is important to consider the learner. Goals and objectives should be age appropriate, and it is important not to set goals or objectives that are too far beyond a student's current knowledge and skills. Lesson plans are of vital importance when thinking about how to utilize effective instruction. Effective lesson plans are the key to success. If you know how to create an effective lesson plan, then you will be able to design effective and coherent instruction for your classroom. One thing to keep in mind when creating lesson plans is TEKS, or Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. TEKS are the basis on which you should center your curriculum around. They can help you arrange lessons logically and sequentially. Another thing to keep in mind when creating lesson plans is state testing. STAR is the state test in Texas, and you will need to be sure to cover the skills that STAR might test your students over. Learning styles are also of vital importance when creating lesson plans. You want to be sure to incorporate different strategies that will stimulate all of your visual, kinesthetic, and auditory learners. You will want to make sure that you have created a successful learning environment. You want to make sure your students feel safe in your classroom, and that way they will feel more comfortable when you are attempting to learn new ideas. Testing and assessment is also important in creating effective instruction. You will want to test your students over the skills you have gone over, but there are also many different ways to test and assess students. You should utilize both formative and summative assessments in your classroom. It is also important for you to be actively involved in your classroom. You can do this by walking around the room instead of sitting at your desk, or by doing the assignments along with the students. When students see that you are actively involved in the learning process, they are more likely to be actively involved as well. Group work is a good strategy for effective instruction. Not all work has to be completed individually. In fact, some students learn better when working in groups. It is important to incorporate time for group work in your lesson plans. Projects are also a great strategy for effective instruction. Students gain a lot of knowledge from working on projects, and you also get to see their creativity and progress. Projects are a great way to assess your students. Including projects in your lesson plans is a wonderful idea. The way that you set up your classroom is also important. You may want to set your tables up in groups. You may want to include inspirational quotes on the wall. The main thing to remember when setting up your classroom is that it should be conducive to the learning environment. The main thing to remember when designing effective instruction in the classroom is that learning is a group effort. You cannot force all of your knowledge onto the students and expect them to understand, nor can you let them go off on their own attempting to learn everything. The student and the teacher must work together for maximum effectiveness in the classroom. To put it all together, teachers must know the difference between goals and objectives and how to create each of these effectively. Goals are more broad ideas, while objectives are more specific and measurable. Creating effective lesson plans are the most important aspect of creating effective instruction, and there are many different aspects of creating lesson plans, such as STAR, TEKS, learning styles, and many more. Finally, a teacher needs to create a warm, friendly environment that is conducive to learning. If we combine all of these aspects together, then we will have mastered creating effective instruction.